I can think of no better metaphor for the rocky development of Wreckfest than to compare it to one of the game's mangled, twisted, and thoroughly destroyed cars that barely makes it over the finish line. This is a game that started its life back in 2012, only to suffer a number of unfortunate setbacks that included everything from a failed crowdfunding campaign to a number of delays. Now, after 7 long years, Wreckfest is finally bringing the Demolition Derby to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. And while it's a little messy and some of the events are repetitive, there's no denying that T-boning your opponent's car over and over again is certainly cathartic. Wreckfest is the new game from developer Bugbear Entertainment, the company best known for the Flatout series. This is a mostly off-road racer that feels like a cross between Sega Rally and Destruction Derby. It's the kind of rough and tumble game where everybody's jockeying for first place and smashing into the opponent's car is not only allowed, but encouraged. This is where you go when you're sick of driving those fancy Lamborghinis and Ferraris, because every car in this game is a heavily reinforced junker. As you might expect, there's not a lot of story or setup here. Wreckfest is split up into a couple different types of events, a traditional multi-lap race and a free-for-all demolition derby. The gameplay is equally simple, mostly consisting of just going forwards, backwards, and using the emergency brake to drift around corners. There's no turbo or items to pick up because this is a no-frills arcade-style racing game where the car is the weapon and defensive driving is the key to winning. The good news is that Bugbear makes the most out of a simple premise by coming up with a lot of creative races and dream matchups. This is a game that literally starts with you using a lawnmower to cause chaos. Before long, we're smashing into tiny cars with a massive school bus, or jumping into a tractor and taking out the opponents. Wreckfest goes well beyond the typical figure-8 tracks and sets up courses where they know you're gonna crash, like using a giant, hard-driving style loop in order to win a race. This is a game that knows exactly what it is and what fans want. You'll find a nice variety of race and demolition types in the campaign mode, which features 5 increasingly difficult tiers to complete. What I like is that not all of these events have you trying to come in first, as a lot of them have you trying to earn a certain amount of wrecks or just getting in the way of everybody else. There are also optional secondary missions, which will help you unlock new cars and equipment. Although it's not as deep as something like Forza or Gran Turismo, Wreckfest does let you customize your cars with a bunch of different parts and paint jobs. Now, there's a messiness to the action that I actually really liked, especially when it comes to the races. We end up competing on small tracks with 24 racers, which is every bit as chaotic as it sounds. But what's nice is that you can usually catch up even if you crash or get run off the road. The computer opponents are challenging, but the difficulty felt fair. It's not like a lot of these types of racing games where you have to drift around every corner and perfectly navigate the track. You can smash into walls, get into tussles with other drivers, and even lose the entire side of your car and still come in first. You can't say that about most racing games. And let me tell you, these cars smash up real good. You expect doors and bumpers to fall off, but these cars get crunched and destroyed in ways that left me giddy with delight. This is especially true in the Demolition Derby events, where every single hit makes your vehicle a little harder to look at and even harder to drive. What's fun is seeing how this translates to the races, which are fairly typical in every other way. There's just something cathartic about cutting one of your opponents in half and coming in first. That said, I do have a few issues with both the race and the demolition events. Like I said, a lot of the racetracks are a little too straightforward. Sure, you get the exciting races where you have to navigate a giant loop, but look, there are far more events where all you're doing is just going around in a big circle. The problem is that we repeat a lot of the same tracks and locations while playing through the campaign, which gives off the impression that there isn't a whole lot of content. We'll swing wildly from cool and inventive stages to something you'd get in pretty much every other racing game. I mean, these events are fine, but they're a bit on the boring side. And then there's the Demolition Derby events, which I have to imagine will be a main draw for some gamers. They're fun, but they sure do get repetitive after a while. The game tries its hardest to mix things up with different vehicles, obstacles, and missions, but most of the events always play out the same way. You're rewarded for staying out of the fray as long as possible, waiting till everybody else has almost no life and then swooping in and winning the day. It doesn't help that the gameplay makes it hard to chase the vulnerable cars and even back up. Well, yes, that's part of the strategy of a Demolition Derby. I found that these types of events got boring quickly. But despite a few repetitive races, I was satisfied by both the variety and the destruction in Wreckfest. I like the look of these old junkers and how mangled they are by the end of the race. There's just something about the simplicity and recklessness that not only helps the game stand out, but also left me satisfied time and time again. And while not every track is a winner, there are some truly memorable courses and matchups that make the whole thing worthwhile. Yeah, Wreckfest is a smashing good time. If you like arcade-style racing games and can't get enough of slamming into the competition, then Wreckfest has you covered. It's not the best-looking racing game on the market and isn't very deep, but the fast-paced gameplay and deformable cars make even the most generic stage designs more exciting. Best of all, the robust single-player campaign is filled with a wide variety of over-the-top events and tracks purposely designed to cause as much chaos as possible. I'd expect nothing less from Wreckfest. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite arcade-style racing game? Also, are you a fan of Demolition Derbies? You know, both in real life and in games. Let me know in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back tomorrow with the second part of the official GamePro video game IQ test. So you better tune in for that. I'm serious. Don't forget. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.